Dawn breaks over Tokyo, March 10, 1945. The city trembles as the first wave of engines growls overhead, deeper than thunder, heavier than storms. At 12:08 a.m., air raid sirens shriek into the night, but for many citizens it is already too late. From the darkness above, silver silhouettes emerge, dozens of B-29 Superfortresses flying lower than the Japanese defenses had prepared for, their bellies opening like steel jaws. Black objects tumble into the void, and a few seconds later, the earth itself seems to ignite. Wooden houses, packed tightly along narrow streets, erupt into flame as if the city had been waiting centuries to burn. In minutes, entire districts vanish into sheets of orange light. Mothers clutch children, soldiers clutch rifles, and even officers in command posts find their radios overwhelmed by chaos. No one can comprehend what is happening. How could a single raid transform the capital of an empire into an inferno so swiftly? U.S. Army Air Force's Mission Report, March 1945. In those early hours, shock spread faster than the flames. Japanese civil defense units, trained to fight conventional high-explosive bombs with sand buckets and water lines, were helpless. The new American incendiary strategy had turned Tokyo into a trap. Fuel-soaked streets carried the blaze as though they were rivers of fire. Heat rose so violently that it twisted metal streetcars into ribbons, pulled oxygen from the air, and created whirlwinds of flame, what survivors would later call a fire tornado. At the Nakajima district, a military policeman described people being lifted off their feet and hurled into flames by the force of the wind. Tokyo Metropolitan Police Report, 1945. The Japanese soldiers on the ground had expected to fight men with rifles and bayonets. Instead, they were powerless against an invisible enemy, American industrial firepower, delivered through machines that no flak gun could reach in time. The roots of this devastation stretched back across the Pacific to the long American struggle to bring war to the Japanese home islands. By 1944, the U.S. had seized Saipan, Tinian, and Guam, turning them into forward air bases for the new B-29 Superfortress, a bomber unlike anything the world had seen. Capable of carrying 10 tons of bombs over 3,000 miles and pressurized for high-altitude flight. It was the pinnacle of wartime aviation engineering. Boeing Engineering Division Report, 1943. The Japanese High Command believed their fighters and flak could hold the skies. They did not yet understand that the Americans had something else in mind, a shift from daylight precision to nighttime area bombing, an adaptation that stunned even Allied commanders when it was first proposed in the months leading to that March night. Japanese cities had largely escaped destruction compared to Germany. Imperial planners pointed to that as proof of their resilience. But the truth was more ominous. The Americans had been refining not just planes, but weapons. Engineers at Standard Oil and Harvard laboratories had perfected napalm, a jellied gasoline designed to cling and burn at temperatures exceeding 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit. Harvard Chemical Warfare Laboratory Report, 1943. In wooden cities like Tokyo, built from pine and paper walls, napalm was not just a bomb. It was an apocalypse in liquid form. By early 1945, U.S. generals argued that precision raids on factories were less effective than a blunt truth. Destroy the workers' homes. Destroy the war machine. Japanese military culture was unprepared for this. Trained in the Bushido Code, soldiers emphasized courage, bayonet charges, and close-quarter ferocity. They had planned to defend the homeland with rifles, machine guns, and even bamboo spears for civilians. None of that mattered when the sky itself turned into fire. A single B-29 squadron could carry more incendiaries than the entire Imperial Army could extinguish in a week. Officers scribbled confused reports, their language breaking down into disbelief. One diary from a surviving pilot read simply, "The Americans have found a way to destroy not only our armies, but our soul." Bundesarchiv. Captured Japanese pilot diary, 1945. Numbers told the grim reality. That single night, 334 B-29 bombers dropped nearly 1,700 tons of bombs. 16 square miles of Tokyo were obliterated. More than 100,000 civilians were killed, making it the deadliest single air raid in history, greater than Dresden, greater even than either atomic bombing to come. Over 1 million were left homeless. Hospitals collapsed. Railway lines melted. Wells boiled. Those who survived carried burns for life, both on their skin and in their memories. U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey, 1946. And yet, for the American commanders, this was only the beginning of a campaign designed to reduce Japan's ability to resist invasion. Behind the inferno stood engineers, technicians, and industrial workers who had labored not with rifles, but with rivets and blueprints. Boeing's teams in Wichita and Renton had pushed the limits of metallurgy to produce the pressurized fuselage of the B-29, while Curtiss-Wright and Pratt & Whitney had built the giant R-3350 engines that gave it range and power. On assembly lines in Detroit and Los Angeles, men and women worked shifts around the clock to produce incendiary canisters by the thousands. These were not faceless machines. They were weapons built by countless hands, each worker unknowingly contributing to the firestorm that consumed Tokyo. War Production Board Report, 1945, the Japanese High Command, meanwhile, clung to outdated assumptions. For years, they had dismissed America as materially strong but spiritually weak. That night proved otherwise. Material power, when fused with tactical adaptation, could be more devastating than any sword or soldier's valor. In the words of one Japanese naval officer, interrogated after the war, "We could not fight against machines built faster than we could destroy them." U.S. Naval Interrogation Report, September 1945. The firebombing of Tokyo marked not just a military defeat, but a psychological one. An empire built on an ore suddenly made fragile by industrial flames. Yet even within that destruction, confusion lingered. How had the Americans been able to launch such a raid with so little resistance? Japanese pilots scrambled, but their planes were outmatched by altitude, speed, and numbers. Anti-aircraft batteries fired wildly, but many bombs were already falling. To those in Tokyo, it seemed as if the Americans had suddenly gained an impossible advantage, a weapon beyond comprehension. Was it new radar guiding them? Some unheard technology? Or was it something even more elusive, a shift in doctrine that the Japanese could not anticipate until it was too late? Imperial Japanese Army Air Defense Report, March 1945. The flames of Tokyo lit up not only the sky, but also a question that would haunt Japan for months. What secret had the Americans unlocked that allowed them to bring entire cities to ruin in a single night? The answer lay not just in the bomb bays of the B-29s, but in the hidden technologies, logistics, and decisions that the Japanese command had underestimated until the very moment their capital became ash. And as Tokyo smoldered, the empire's generals were left staring at maps, radios silent, and cities vulnerable, wondering when and how the Americans would strike next. The answer to Tokyo's burning skies lay in a single, decisive advantage. The United States had married technology with strategy in ways the Japanese never imagined possible. It was not just the B-29 itself, but the entire ecosystem that supported it: radar navigation, advanced firebombing tactics, and an industrial machine that could mass-produce both bombers and incendiaries faster than Japan could comprehend. The hidden weapon was not a single device, but a network of innovations, each piece fitting into a larger puzzle. Together, they gave America the power to erase cities in hours, and no battlefield courage could counter it. U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey, 1946. Central to this transformation was the B-29 Superfortress. Designed at enormous cost, over $3 billion, more than the Manhattan Project itself, it represented the zenith of wartime aviation. Its pressurized cabin allowed crews to operate at altitudes up to 31,000 feet, above most flak and fighter interception. With a range of 3,250 miles and a payload capacity of up to 20,000 pounds, it could strike deep into Japan from island bases in the Marianas. For Wright R-3350 duplex Cyclone radial engines, each producing 2,200 horsepower, gave it the thrust to carry such weight. The bomber was armed with remote-controlled defensive turrets, guided by analog computing sites, a marvel of mechanical-electronic integration for its time. Technical Manual TM1 to 390, 1944, but machinery alone does not win wars. It was the doctrine shift, spearheaded by General Curtis LeMay, that unlocked the bomber's true potential. Early raids from high altitude using precision Norden bomb sites had failed. Jet streams scattered bomb clusters, targets were missed, and Japanese industries dispersed production into small workshops. LeMay, a cold strategist, made the radical decision to abandon precision altogether. He ordered the B-29s to fly low at night, stripped of most defensive guns to save weight, and to saturate cities with incendiaries. His reasoning was brutal. Japan's wooden cities were the true factories of war. Destroy them, and the weapons would never be built. LeMay memo to XXI Bomber Command, February 1945. At the heart of this plan was napalm. Developed in 1942 by a team led by Harvard chemist Louis Fieser, it was an adhesive gel that burned hotter, longer, and spread wider than any previous incendiary. Mixed with magnesium and phosphorus, napalm bombs ignited entire blocks within seconds. The M69 incendiary bomblet, manufactured by the Standard Oil Development Company, was the deadliest of all. Each cluster of 38 bomblets scattered over wide areas, their fuses timed to penetrate rooftops before ignition. In tests at Dugway Proving Ground, Utah, mock Japanese villages had been constructed to study how quickly the bombs would consume them. Engineers, carpenters, and even architects had contributed, unwittingly designing prototypes for the very destruction soon unleashed on Tokyo. U.S. Chemical Warfare Service Report, 1944. The decisive proof of this doctrine came not at Tokyo first, but at an earlier test case. The raid on Kobe, February 4, 1945. That night, 159 B-29 struck the port city, dropping 1,000 tons of incendiaries. Within hours, 21% of the city was destroyed. Factories, shipyards, and rail yards burned in unison with civilian homes. Japanese reports revealed the panic among fire brigades, who found their hoses melted and their water supplies boiled away. The fire moved faster than men could run. One survivor recalled, Kobe Municipal Fire Department Report, 1945. For the U.S. Command, Kobe proved that LeMay's plan was not just theory. It was a weapon system unto itself. Napalm plus low-altitude bombing plus overwhelming numbers. Japanese defenders were baffled. Their anti-aircraft artillery was designed for high-altitude raids. Their night fighters, such as the Nakajima J-1N1 Gecko, were few and obsolete compared to the numbers of B-29s arriving. Radar coverage, limited and outdated, often picked up formations only minutes before bombs fell. Even when pilots managed to scramble, the sheer altitude and defensive turrets of the superfortresses made interceptions costly. After-action reports recorded Japanese frustration. We could see their formations in the moonlight, but our guns could not reach them. Imperial Japanese Army Air Defense Log, 1945. This mismatch between doctrine and technology became catastrophic when the raids intensified, and on the night of March 9 to 10, 1945, the U.S. unleashed its most devastating demonstration, Operation Meetinghouse, the Tokyo firebombing. Starting at 12:08 a.m., M-334 B-29s swept over the city in waves, each carrying an average of 6,000 pounds of incendiaries. Flying at altitudes as low as 5,000 feet, they faced reduced flak fire but maximized bombing accuracy. The bombers dropped their payloads in a deliberate pattern, forming a massive X across the city to trap civilians in the inferno. Within 30 minutes, firestorms merged into an unstoppable sea of flames. Temperatures rose so high that canals boiled. Asphalt streets turned liquid. Civil defense volunteers collapsed from heat exhaustion before they could even deploy their pumps. U.S. Army Air Force's mission debrief, March 1945. Enemy disbelief echoed through every Japanese report that night. One dramatized composite account from an Imperial officer reads, "We thought their planes would come for our arsenals, our docks. Instead, they came for our people." How could war be fought when the battlefield itself is the city? Many survivors described the sound not as bombing but as a roaring tide, a single continuous thunder that seemed to roll forever. In the words of another survivor, "We thought the gods themselves had set the sky on fire." Tokyo Survivor Oral History, 1947. The figures were staggering. In just 3 hours, Tokyo lost 16 square miles of its core. Over 267,000 buildings were destroyed. 100,000 civilians died, and more than 1 million were rendered homeless. American losses were only 14 bombers. By dawn, smoke plumes rose 26,000 feet into the sky, visible from 150 miles away. The sheer asymmetry of destruction left Japanese leaders stunned. They had lost more in one night than many European cities lost in months. And LeMay's command still had hundreds of raids to follow. U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey, 1946. Technicians, engineers, and workers were at the heart of this devastation. Detroit assembly lines had produced incendiary bombs by the millions. Boeing workers, many of them women, had riveted B-29 fuselages together under round-the-clock schedules. Pratt & Whitney mechanics had labored tirelessly to fix engine overheating problems that once plagued the Superfortress. Each solved technical challenge became a step closer to turning American air power into an industrial avalanche. On the Japanese side, factory workers and civil engineers scrambled to adapt, building fire breaks, training bucket brigades, and dispersing industry into rural areas. But no adaptation could outpace the tempo of American raids, which now struck with near-daily regularity. War Production Board Report, 1945. The devastation of Tokyo was only one chapter in a larger campaign. Nagoya, Osaka, and Kobe all would follow. By July 1945, 64 Japanese cities had been firebombed, with a total destruction of 40% of Japan's urban area. Factories lay in ashes. Railroads twisted into blackened wreckage. Morale collapsed under the unrelenting infernos. Japanese leaders, confronted with these losses, still debated whether to fight on, hoping to repel an invasion with kamikaze tactics. But their cities were already gone. The battlefield had shifted beyond their control, and their people knew it. Imperial Cabinet Minutes, June 1945. The hidden advantage had revealed itself fully. American industrial capacity, combined with technological innovation, wielded through a doctrine of overwhelming, systematic destruction. Against that, the Japanese could not adapt fast enough, nor shield their citizens from the storms that followed each night. And yet, the greatest question remained, not just whether Japan could endure more raids, but what this new kind of warfare meant for the future of humanity itself. As the ashes of Tokyo cooled, the strategic effect was immediate. Japanese war production, already strained by shortages of raw materials, collapsed. Aircraft factories in Nagoya were incinerated. Steel mills in Kobe were left twisted and melted. The Mitsubishi shipyards, once the pride of the Imperial Navy, were reduced to ashes. With workshops, transport hubs, and power stations consumed, the empire's industrial heart ceased to beat. Workers who might have built planes, tanks, and ships now searched only for food and shelter. Even the mighty Zero fighter, once a terror of the Pacific skies, suffered from poor quality construction as supply lines broke down. Imperial Navy Technical Bureau Report, July 1945. Yet the psychological toll was even greater. Survivors recalled endless nights where the sky itself seemed to rain fire. Families huddled in dugouts, only to suffocate as firestorms drained oxygen from the air. Mothers carried children into rivers, hoping water could shield them from flames, only to drown in boiling currents. Soldiers, powerless against the bombers, could only watch their homeland burn. One post-war interrogation recorded a Japanese officer admitting, "We felt as though we had been struck by a weapon beyond war itself." It was not a battle. It was annihilation. U.S. Naval Interrogation Report, October 1945. For a nation steeped in Bushido and sacrifice, the sense of helplessness was shattering. The firebombings undermined the very foundation of Japanese morale. Meanwhile, American aircrews experienced their own psychological strain. Though their losses were light compared to earlier missions, the sights they witnessed from their bomb bays were seared into memory. From 5,000 feet, entire neighborhoods glowed like volcanic eruptions, their outlines visible even through smoke. One pilot later recalled, "It was as though we were gods of destruction, holding a torch over the world," dramatized composite. The crews did not celebrate. Many returned in silence, aware they had unleashed something beyond ordinary war. The distance between bomber and target blurred moral lines, raising questions that still haunt air power debates today. U.S. Army Air Forces Veteran Oral History, 1947. At the center of it all was General Curtis LeMay. Cold, uncompromising, and driven, he insisted that the firebombings were necessary to shorten the war and save lives. In his own blunt words after the conflict, "If we had lost the war, we would have been prosecuted as war criminals." LeMay interview, 1946. His doctrine, stripping bombers of guns, flying at night, and saturating cities, became a chilling but effective model for industrialized warfare. For the Japanese high command, LeMay's campaign left them trapped. They could no longer protect their citizens, nor could they maintain production. The emperor's advisors were forced to admit that Japan's defeat was now only a matter of time. Imperial Cabinet Minutes, July 1945. The legacy of the firebombing campaign rippled far beyond Japan. Strategically, it forced Japanese leaders into despair months before the atomic bombs fell. American intelligence noted increasing numbers of intercepted messages expressing hopelessness and disillusionment among officers. Civilian morale, once sustained by propaganda, fractured under the relentless flames. Post-war analyses concluded that the incendiary raids alone could have compelled surrender, even without nuclear weapons, a point still debated among historians. U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey, 1946, but the impact extended further, shaping the doctrines of the Cold War and beyond. The idea that air power could cripple a nation's will to fight by targeting its cities became central to nuclear strategy. In Korea and Vietnam, the use of firebombs and napalm echoed lessons first applied over Tokyo. During the Gulf War of 1991, American planners used precision-guided munitions not only against tanks and bunkers but also against infrastructure, power grids, bridges, and communication hubs, mirroring LeMay's doctrine of destroying the enemy's war-making capacity at its roots. The concept of shock and awe was the descendant of Tokyo's firestorms. U.S. Air Force Air Power Doctrine, 1991. At the human level, the campaign underscored a truth as old as war. Victory depended not only on soldiers, but on those behind the lines. Boeing engineers who solved pressurization flaws, Harvard chemists who perfected napalm formulas, and Detroit workers who riveted bomber fuselages, all played roles as vital as any frontline rifleman. The firebombings were as much their work as the pilots. On the Japanese side, the courage of factory workers who continued assembling planes in burnout workshops, or civil defense volunteers who carried buckets into infernos, testified to resilience even in hopelessness. Their efforts could not prevent defeat, but they defined the human spirit within the catastrophe. War Production Board Report, 1945. Tokyo Civil Defense Archives, 1946. The moral reckoning was profound. For many, the sight of Tokyo reduced to ash raised questions that would only deepen after Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Could such destruction be justified? Were cities legitimate targets? Or had technology advanced so far that morality lagged behind? Survivors of Tokyo's raid carried scars not only on their bodies but also in their memories, testifying for decades to come about the night when humanity crossed a threshold. One survivor later told interviewers, "We were not soldiers. We were people in our homes. And the fire came for us all the same." Tokyo Survivor Testimony, 1960. But in the ruins of Tokyo, the war's future was already being written. Japanese leaders, once convinced of their spiritual superiority, now recognized that industrial warfare had transformed conflict. No code of honor, no last stand, could match factories, engineers, and machines that delivered destruction from beyond reach. The message was clear. In modern war, it was not merely armies that decided battles, but the unseen labor of those who built, maintained, and innovated. Cities could fall faster than armies. Steel and fire could outweigh courage. Imperial Army War College Post-War Report, 1946. As the firebombing campaign gave way to atomic attacks in August, Japan's fate was sealed. Yet, even as Hiroshima and Nagasaki overshadowed the incendiary raids in public memory, for many survivors and strategists, the lesson of Tokyo was already clear. War had entered a new dimension. It was no longer about the clash of armies alone, but about the capacity to destroy a society's foundations in a single night that in the silence after surrender. One Japanese general reflected with haunting clarity, "We had prepared to meet your armies. We had not prepared to meet your factories, dramatized. His words encapsulated the legacy of the firebombings, a truth echoed in every modern conflict since. For in the age of total war, connection outweighed firepower, speed defeated armor, and cities, once symbols of life, became the most fragile targets of all.